Hey everybody, this is Everyday Commentary, and the thing you see in front of you is a number 5 jack plane. And this is where the phrase jack of all trades comes from. This is a number 5 plane, and it's in a little wooden case that I made for it so it doesn't damage the bottom of the plane. But this is a relatively large block plane. As you can see, it's about the size from my elbow to my wrist, maybe a little bit longer. And this plane is often the first and sometimes the only plane that people will use in woodworking. And that's because it earns the name, or it created the name, the jack of all trades. This is a jack plane, so that's the jack. And the reason why they say it's the jack of all trades is because the number 5 plane, that was actually a 5.5, a Wood River 5.5. The number 5 plane is big enough to do a lot of the heavy flattening tasks, where you're actually like planing a surface down. But it's also small enough to do other more detail-oriented tasks. And so it could flex into a bunch of different roles. It could do the big stuff, it could do the little stuff, it could do everything in between. So unlike in a lot of things where you'd buy number 1, number 2, number 3, oftentimes what would happen is people would buy the number 5, the number 1, and the number, I think it's an 8 or a 9. And then they would fill in between those because the extremes and the middle get you a lot of coverage. So the reason I'm talking about jack planes is because I want to talk about these two knives. The knife on the right is probably one you've seen something like. This is the Paramilitary 2. But this is the Blades We Love Paramilitary 2 modification called the PM2 Ultra. And so what this knife does is it takes the compression lock and it buries it in the handle so it's no longer pinchy. And it uses a button activation. So as you can see here, there's a button that's attached to the leaf spring arm of the compression lock, and it goes through a hole in the handle, and it allows you to close the blade without fidgeting inside. And so this is a Paramilitary 2 and S45VN. It's a left-handed Paramilitary 2, but they've modified it so that it takes this PM2 Ultra upgrade. The other thing that they did is they anodized the screws, and they included this really excellent deep carry over the top pocket clip from Lynch Clips. So this is my current jack of all trades knives. It can do basically anything you want it to do. If you needed to do hard use tasks, it can do hard use tasks. If you needed to do precision tasks like cutting thread or food prep, it can do that. This knife has done a lot and seen a lot. It is an excellent, excellent blade, and I haven't cleaned it up, so it's a little smudgy. But this is the current knife that I say is like my number 5 plane. It can do everything you need it to do, and it can do it pretty well. And as you can see, it has really thick blade stock, but because it has a full flat grind, it comes down to this really nice, super fine, and this one is extra sharp. I mean, like, it is so sharp, super duper sharp. So that's the current jack of all trades knife. But here's a new knife, and this is the TRM Bulldog. And this is a knife that I got directly from TRM, and it also is mega sharp because it just came from the factory. So super crispy sharp. And it has a similar function. If you know anything about TRM knives, you know that they have really thin blade stock. And this has thinner blade stock than the PM2. But because of the steel liners, and it has full steel liners, because of the sliding bar lock, which they call the river lock, and because of that thicker than average blade stock, this knife can be pressed into a lot of different roles that I would not feel comfortable doing with a thinner and less substantial blade. I love the N2. It is my favorite production knife on the market right now. It is one of my 2 favorite production knives of all time. But this knife gives you a little bit more of a hand-filling grip, and it also gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of what you want to do with it because of this thicker blade stock and the more robust build. So the question is, does this knife, which is smaller, replace this knife? And the interesting part is, this knife has a relatively long blade, and if you put them like right up next to each other, you can see like from blade to blade, you're losing very little. Very, very little. You know, like I would say maybe a 1/4 inch cutting edge. Maybe. And this knife is substantially smaller in the pocket, as you can see. I mean, it's like just so much smaller. Now, the Paramilitary 2 has never been a great blade to length, edge to length ratio knife because it has this like little parrot's beak here at the end. But if you are somebody who has limitations on what you can carry based on what you wear or, you know, where you live, this is going to come in as a shorter blade, but not giving up too much in terms of overall functionality. And so I think it's a real question as to which is better. Now, if I put this knife up against the regular PM2 with its pinchy compression lock, there's no question. This knife is better. But when you put it up against these two knives against each other, then I think there is a real question as to whether or not, you know, which one is better. This one is not readily available. You kind of have to wait for it to come back into a stock, and then you have to, you know, pick out your model. And it is significantly more expensive than this knife. But this knife gives you so much versatility in such a tiny package that maybe this is the new jack of all trades, master of none from the hand plane thing. By the way, that jack of all trades, master of none thing was because there were certain tasks that the number 5 plane just couldn't do. Like you couldn't get in on the edge or do certain things on smaller pieces. But this knife is small compared to this knife. And so it's giving you a lot of the functionality with not a lot of loss in terms of performance. You know, this knife has always been one of those knives that's like, well, you know, the blade to handle ratio is all screwed up, but man, it's great in the hand. And that is true. The PM2 is one of the best knives in the hand. I would love to see some contoured scales here, but it locks in great. But the thing about the Bulldog is, it is also great in the hand. I especially love this area right here where you can see that they've done some really good detail work on making the handhold nice. So that's a great feature. I love the way this knife fills the hand. So which one is still the jack of all trades in my collection? I don't know. We're going to, you know, carry this knife a lot more to figure it out because I've carried this knife or some version of this knife for years and years. But I've been kind of surprised I have not reached for this since that arrived. So we'll see if it stays that way. I just wanted to give you like a quick video and talk about this idea of the jack of all trades knives. I really like the TRM Bulldog. I also like the PM2 Ultra. It's a great knife. And if you're in the mood for a block plane or a jack plane, this is a great jack plane, and it's like $225. And you get the rosewood handles. Now, you'll see. Man, this thing is freaking heavy. I have a little tiny bit of rust here. Nothing too bad. And the blade is gunked up, but the blade always gets gunked up. Little bit of rust up here on the sole over here. And it's not even like, it's just surface rust. It's nothing bad. But I'll probably put some WD-40 on this before I put this back now that I talked about it. A little bit of surface rust up here. This is just the nature of the beast. We have hand tools. Man, this is a really awkward position to hold this thing in. By the way, I lifted the blade off, so it has 2 magnets that kind of hold it in place. It's also a very precise fit, but it won't stick with it. So if I want to pull it out, it'll come out. But if I have it like on the edge, it'll hold it. It's just enough. That's what I wanted. I didn't want it to be like I have to pull these things apart. I didn't want it to be a sheath. I wanted it to be a rest. And that's what it is. Oh man, this is such an awkward position to hold these things. So, jack of all trades knives. Talk to you later.